Hi, welcome back to The Conversation. I'm Nick Robinson, and I'm here with Paul Dezay and Rebecca Milne. And today we're thinking about anxiety. At The Conversation, we put faith into conversation with real life stuff, and very little gets more real than the anxiety that we feel. 19.1% of Americans are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder every year. And in their lifetime, about 31.1% of people will experience some kind of anxiety disorder. That means 1 in 3 people during their lifetime will report having an anxiety disorder. I think based on the number of people that I talk to and my own experience in life, I think the number is probably a lot higher than that. We're coming to you at the end of October, beginning of November, and anxiety in the United States and across the world is really high right now. There's all the regular stuff that's going on. There's also an election coming up, and it is driving anxiety in people. And you can tell by the way that people are acting and behaving in the world. And so as we get started today, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about our anxiety right now in this moment on a scale of 1 to 10. As we talk, I want to invite you to think about your anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. What are you feeling right now? Check in with your emotions, with your actions, and wonder why you're feeling that way. Paul, you want to go first?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Let's see. I would say my anxiety level, 1 being not anxious, 10 being freaking out, I'd say I'm sitting around a 7 or 8. Pretty anxious, to be honest with you. I feel like a little, the worry of what's going to happen and how's this all going to play out and how's it going to affect me and the people I love, my daughter and grandchildren. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. Rebecca, what about you?
I was going to say 7.5.
7.5.
Yeah, so kind of like right in your range.
Yeah.
Because it's like you have your normal everyday anxiety, and then you have like the anxiety of the season on top of it. So I think I'm sitting at a solid 7.5. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, I am definitely an 8. As we were talking about this earlier, I'm thinking an 8. A lot of it is normal everyday stuff for me. It's just being a parent, being a pastor, having a job that demands a lot. I love to joke about it being 1 day a week, and it's a good gig if you can get it, but it's really a lot more than that. And just there's a lot to do. I just have a lot of things that I feel a little bit behind on, and then you add this major political event, and I think yesterday or the day before, I got 13 emails from a political party that assumes that I support them. Mm-hmm. And that's just a lot of emails and a lot of people asking things of me that on this topic that really feels like too big for me to always impact, to always make a change on. And so one of the ways we're going to kind of respond to our anxiety and this number that we're feeling is we're going to listen to a wise thinker, somebody who has given advice to people about what to do during an election season. And what we're going to talk about is, does that actually even really help us? Here's this smart person who has said something. Do we think that helps? And this person is Brian Zahnd. He's a pastor. Paul, you want to tell us something about Brian?
Yeah, Brian is a pastor of Word of Life Church in St. Joseph, Missouri. And he's written numerous books, and his church has been through the ringer, especially dealing with politics through the years. And he has some wisdom that he wrote 10 years ago or so. So it's not new. It's not wisdom for this particular election. It's general wisdom.
Yes, and he's not writing this saying he's pro-Harris or pro-Trump because these candidates were not even on the radar when he was writing this.
Exactly.
So I know his name. I know he kind of stands out in some circles. St. Louis has been through some political things. And sometimes I wonder about this intersection between politics and faith. And I was at an event that was politics, or it was like theology on tap kind of politics conversation. There were people who had some drinks and were talking about faith and how it interacts with real life. And they brought up this idea of there's a difference between being political. Everything we do is political. It affects the people around us. It affects the way the world works. And of being partisan, of kind of pushing one agenda over another. And so we're not really going to get into the partisan part of that
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
But we are going to talk about politics a little bit today. Brian Zahnd, in his kind of advice, he gave us 10 things that are helpful for Christians to keep in mind. And I think they're helpful for all of us to keep in mind, whether we identify as Christ followers or not. As we're kind of approaching election seasons, as we're thinking about the ballots that we're going to cast and how it's going to affect us in the world. And I thought I might just read through the 10 real fast.
Okay.
And then we're gonna kind of highlight a couple of them that really stood out up to us later.
Yeah.
So Brian Zahnd wrote these things. Number one, the political process, while necessary, has little to do with how God is saving the world. 2, the fate of the kingdom of God does not depend upon political contests. 3, don't be naive. Political parties are interested in Christian votes more than they are in Christian values. The bottom line for political parties, number 4, the bottom line for political parties is power. The bottom line for Christians is love. And therein lies the rub. Number 5, while in pursuit of the ring of power, you are not permitted to abandon the Sermon on the Mount. So we got a little Tolkien in there with a little bit of Jesus. Number 6, if your political passion makes it hard for you to love your neighbor as yourself, you need to turn it down a notch. 7, your task is to bring the salt of Christian civility to an ugly and acrimonious political process. 8, to dismember the body of Christ over politics is a grievous sin, one that I've experienced. 9, exercise your liberty to vote your conscience and conviction, while accepting that other Christians will do the same and vote differently than you. And number 10, his last one, it's more important that your soul be filled with love than it is for your political team to win the game.
Those are good, man.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about the Steelers winning games. How do you guys feel about Steelers wins?
Yes.
Amazing.
Amazing, yeah.
Go to bed happy.
As a Colts fan, it's important to me that my soul is not attached to Colts victories in this season right now.
Well, that's right.
Next season, Colts,
Yeah, it's
Always
fair.
next season.
Nick, if I could,
Oh yes, Dean is with us.
I'll be on Nick's side, so it'll be a Pittsburgh versus Colts type of thing. How's that?
Oh,
We're going through a change right now. You guys did, and you're 6-2 now. It's a great thing for you. I wish we were 6-2, but we're not. So I'll be back here just interjecting anytime.
Yeah. Dean is our producer, and he's here to help keep us on track and make sure we look good.
Yeah.
Well, Dean says we're going through a change. As fans of the Colts, change is painful.
It is,
And this election, no matter what happens, there's going to be change.
for sure.
And there's going to be pain for some of us. So the one that stands out to me, I'll go first because I'm picking the first one. I'm picking number 1 on this list. The one that really stands out to me today is the political process, while necessary, has little to do with how God is saving the world. And I think about this in really broad terms too, not just God has this plan of salvation that you can find in Scripture and that people like us preach about and talk about and apply to our lives, but there's just something bigger going on too. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember the Bush-Kerry election, but I remember.
I got you, Nick. Don't worry.
Yeah, I was traveling. I was studying abroad. It was this great experience, and in Europe, we'd have someone wait our table, and they would be able to tell where we were from. We just screamed American. We were loud, obnoxious. We wore baseball hats and whatever. It makes it easy to identify us as Americans. And they would come up to our table and they would ask like Bush or Kerry, and it was just like this you could tell their response. Our response was really important to how they were going to treat us and what they were going to think about Americans. And to the European mind at the time, there was one answer. A lot of my friends had another answer, and like in that moment, all of that felt so important. And it was important, but here, however many years later, I bet some of us,
Decades.
feel nostalgic for such a simple election, where this feels heated, this feels heavy, this just feels like a really tense moment in history. And so this political process, while necessary, has little to do with how God is saving the world. Reminds me that one, there's a bigger story unfolding that I am a part of, maybe a small part of, but I'm part of it. God is doing something and maybe not using my vote to do it all, but the world has made it through times that have felt this tough and tougher before.
Sure.
God has been faithful through those times, and God will be faithful through this time. Humanity has survived through the tough times, and humanity will survive through these times. And that helps like my anxiety in this moment, because it just helps me take a step back, take a little pressure off of this moment, and know, I don't want to say like everything will be okay no matter who wins, because we're voting for a reason. We go through this process for a reason, but this grand sweep of history will continue on. I have this faith in a God and humanity that we can make it through this as well.
Sure. I have a question for you.
Sure.
So what does it mean to you that God is saving the world? How do you think that's like playing out?
Yeah, I'm tempted to go to like a really nerdy seminary answer.
Please do.
Yeah, I'll try to save us from that. One, it's always hard for me to kind of tell exactly what God's plan is and how God is saving the world, because I think some people feel really solidly that they know exactly what God is doing right now. In America, Hurricane Katrina came through New Orleans and areas of the Gulf South and just devastated stuff. And there were some religious leaders who just felt absolutely certain that that was God's judgment on that city and on those cities for behaviors and for some of the ways their economics are driven, for some of their religious choices. And I just don't believe that that's how God gets God's point across. I don't think you better behave or God's going to strike you down by lightning. As a pastor, there's a lot of people who come in my church who don't normally come in church and like, well, I don't know about being in here because God's going to strike me down with lightning. I'm just like, that is not what God does.
That's Zeus. That's not the God.
Yeah, wrong religion.
Yeah.
There's nowhere in the Bible that God does that, right? Where God actually literally uses lightning. I mean, I know there's the story about the Ark of the Covenant at one point doing some things. Well, we'll skip that for now. But for me, what God saving the world means is that God is active, getting our attention, and I think building things like beloved community, building things where people love each other, respect each other, follow God together, love our neighbor as ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like, to me, when God is about the business of saving the world, it's teaching us to love one another as ourselves, to love each other as Jesus has loved us. And that's the work that God is about. So there's my answer.
Yeah. I'm going to throw in a quote. It's kind of a life motto. It's a twist on Mother Teresa. Little things done with great love will change the world. And I do believe that the littlest of things God uses somehow to heal the world, to put this thing back together again. And sometimes you just don't see it.
Yeah, and our world is different sizes. Mm-hmm. So we can say, well, the little thing that I do here of showing love isn't going to affect somebody in Thailand today. Mm-hmm. But it's going to affect the world as a whole. It's going to bring the average of goodness up. And it might have a great effect on somebody's local experience of the world.
Sure.
I think it all just depends on how you are viewing God. If you're viewing God as just a person to cast punishment or judgment, and if God's only controlling the bad things in the world, then that's going to skew your whole entire worldview. But if God is here and created us to partner with Him for the restoration of all things, that's going to have a completely different worldview. And I think that's ultimately it. That we want to restore things and do good and do no harm and all of those things.
Yeah, and I read it and understand it all through the lens of Jesus. Paul, sometimes you call it the Jesus story. Mm-hmm. Jesus was sacrificial in His love. And if my explanation for what's happening in the world doesn't match up with Jesus' sacrificial actions for me, then I'm probably missing the point. I'm reading something else into it, because Jesus is the clearest revelation of who God is that we've ever experienced.
Right.
Absolutely. There's this thing called the butterfly effect in science, that one little thing affects something else, and even can affect around the globe. And I think there's this element of like, I want to believe that. I believe that God's love working through broken, messed up people somehow can bring real change. I might not see it in my lifetime. I might not see what's happening over in Thailand, but maybe something bigger is going on that I'm ever aware of.
I think we can get discouraged if we don't see the fruits of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of it is the faith that I'm doing the best that I can in this moment. And I want to do better and be better. And that God will use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is something I rely on a lot in my own preaching is God will intervene even when I'm terrible at it. God will, even when my sermon doesn't go according to, it's a common trope amongst preachers that people may not be aware of. Like the sermon that I thought was going to be really good, everyone else thinks is terrible. And the one I thought was going to be terrible, everyone says, that one really touched me today.
Absolutely.
And God just uses even our weakness to reveal God's strength.
Yeah.
Yep, it's not about us.
And that's the political process, while necessary, has little to do with how God is saving the world. Part of it, it's not always about us.
Yeah.
There are more people involved. And most of my anxiety, a lot of it's about me. A lot of it's about my kids, my family, other things, but we're all a little bit selfish. And so to remember that all of these political things aren't necessarily about me. They send me a lot of emails, but they don't really know my name.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
You know, guys, I think that listening to you guys, sitting back here and listening to you guys, we really need to realize that the political environment has changed so much in the past 10 years, 15 years, that it's basically it's just a new beast, and I don't mind calling it a beast, you know. So I mean, how do you guys react to something like that?
Well, I had a conversation yesterday with a person I respect, a person in my church, and he was talking about how we have put so much pressure on what today looks like that, you know, this is the worst it's ever been, and it's terrible. And, you know, he's like, but I remember the late 60s when a president was murdered right in the public eye, and I remember bomb threats, and I remember all of this where life was a lot more stressful, and we got through that, and I think we can get through it again. And it put it in perspective. I didn't experience that firsthand, right? But I can imagine what that anxiety felt like then, when things were literally like crumbling in. And now maybe my anxiety over like one little remark on the internet is maybe not as big of a deal as some of the things then. So I think that putting it in perspective that things will be okay again, one way or another, or not, that helps me.
I remind myself that somebody has manufactured this environment.
Sure.
There are people who intentionally drive up anxiety, drive up the importance of the political process, drive up this idea that the other political party is our enemy. Scripture says something about our enemies. You might remember about loving them. But it's a game to be won, and it's easier to control us. And so by reminding myself of that, hopefully, I also decreased my ability to be controlled by other people. I mean, I'm a human like everyone else, but someone else is doing this for power, which I think might lead us into the one, Paul, that you wanted to bring up out of Ryan Zahn's.
Yeah. So I am a geek. I'm a nerd. Everybody knows that. But it's the Tolkien influence here I found pretty beautiful. It's number 5. While in pursuit of the Ring of Power, that's reference to Lord of the Rings and Gollum and how it turned him into a monster, you're not permitted to abandon the Sermon on the Mount. And so there's this, in Zahn's statement here, number 5, there's this pursuit of power, this ring of power, and there's this Sermon on the Mount. And these competing influences, I think, are important for me. What we've seen, and Dean, you brought this up, you know, the last 10 years, what we've seen is Christianity and partisan politics get married. And it's really caused anxiety. Because then I look at Scripture and I see Jesus and the way he's loving, the outcast and the marginalized, and has the opportunity to gain power in the temptations in the wilderness, and he chooses not to. So we have this competing notion of what it means to really live a life as a human being. Do we pursue power? And with power comes influence and money and all this.
Great responsibility.
All
Right, I heard that.
Yeah, but we have, or this other way, which actually is about decreasing ourselves and loving those who nobody thinks about.
Yeah.
And so I love this particular quote because it reminds me that there are a couple different ways to handle all this. And the Sermon on the Mount being kind of like Jesus's, maybe his constitution, or, he laid some things out, his political statements of how we are to treat each other, and loving your neighbor, loving your enemy, loving yourself, things that we've mentioned, are not probably going to get you a lot of power in the way that some people look at it, but it maybe can make a difference in the life of somebody else. So I really like this. When you guys think of that particular quote?
I want to know, so assume I've never read any Tolkien books. What is the ring about? Tell me what it is.
Yeah, so there's this ring that provides kind of control. It gives the ability of a person to turn invisible, but it really gives somebody the ability to manipulate and make things happen. And everybody wants that. I mean, how would you like it if you had the ability to make decisions and they happen, right? And so for this one individual, it absolutely turned him into a monster. Turned him into Gollum, as the picture of the monster, my precious, going after this. It was driving his life.
A very accurate impersonation.
No. I don't even attempt to really be that.
Nobody can do it.
But it's this idea that ring of power is real, and there are a lot of people out there that's what they're grasping for, and it turns them into a monster. I don't want that. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my family. I don't want that for the people in my church community. There's a different path.
So I was going to ask a follow-up question. Assume I've never read the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in the Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So Jesus' greatest servants, it's found, if you look in the Bible, Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, and there's a lot of really good stuff in there. He says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. There's the Beatitudes, there's the Lord's Prayer, there is the salt and light, to love your neighbor. It's kind of this other path. In fact, he says that there's this wide path that leads to destruction, and maybe that would be a really good idea of the ring of power. But then there's this other path that leads to life, and that's what I want. I want life the way it was created to be. And I think if you really look at that from my perspective, life the way it was meant to be was a life of love. Love God, love my neighbor, love my family, love my enemy, love myself, broken mess that I am. But love me enough to go to a therapist, love me enough to seek help, love me enough to pray and take a walk outside, self-care. But I think there's this other way of living that Jesus shares in the Sermon on the Mount that is kind of upside down to the ring of power. I don't know. What do you guys think?
No. Two things I think of with the ring of power is one, the prestige and ego aspect of what it does to a person when they have it. And another thing I think of is the fight for it, and how in the movies or books it's all these journeys to obtain it, and how when we look around it's who has the power and who is interpreting that power. And so ego and power are two things, and the Sermon on the Mount is the opposite of those things.
I'm reminded just that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so even when we're like voting for political parties, I kind of think a check and a balance in power is really important. I mean, it's part of what makes, I think, America function. I am not an expert on those kinds of things, but I think the checks and the balances are a pretty important part of our system being able to function, because it keeps any one person or any one group of people from taking all of the power for themselves. You're always having to respond to someone else, either voters or judicial Supreme Courts or Congress or the president. There's someone else that's involved in all of this process. And so I think in our pursuit of faith and life, trying to get more and more power distracts us, one, from these other things that are in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus takes some of our understandings and really turns them on their head. And it feels like something we want, but that we, in the end, don't actually want. Like, how Gollum, once he had that one ring, do you think he was really happy? Living in a cave in darkness at the bottom of a mountain by himself, like, yeah, he had the one ring, but boy, that doesn't seem how I want to live.
My precious. Yeah. For him, living in the cave, he still referred to it as something that was precious to him. I think power has that ability to make us see things not the way they really are. And I wonder if, really the pursuit of power, the pursuit of other things, pursuit of money, pursuit of all these things, can make us less human, at least attempt to turn us into something that we weren't created for. And I don't want that for
And then it isolates.
Yeah.
He's
Oh,
alone.
that's a great point.
So power is isolating.
Why is it that we want to get so close to it? I mean, like if somebody's in power, like even in a church organization or a business organization, we really want to know the president, or we really want to know the district superintendent or the bishop. We really want to get close to the person who's making the decisions. There's an element there. And
Power makes life easier. Like, just how much would you give? Probably nothing. But like, imagine having a friend who was very wealthy and just took care of all your needs and gave you everything you wanted. Mm-hmm. Again, it sounds like an easy life, but then your job becomes keeping that person happy with you, so they'll keep giving you what you want. And so, just like the power, even when you're seeking to be near it, like severs relationships.
Sure. And then it causes a division within. You're like one person in front of that person who has power, but really, you're somebody different. And that dualism, the thing that separates us from who we really are, does bring anxiety. I mean, the most peace, at least I experience, is when I can be myself. When I don't have to worry about somebody judging me or criticizing me, when I can just share what's going on right here with me. That's the reason I got a therapist. Somebody there to listen to me. And I think we all crave authenticity or crave just to be ourselves without having to, split ourselves where we pursue power, pursue money, and then try to live out a loving life.
If I could interrupt real quick, because I don't want you to get away from this ring of power thing, and I want to remind you that the Hobbit and Bilbo and Frodo, they were very simple people. And they were able to, how long did Bilbo have the ring? Mm-hmm. And he wasn't this almighty power. He knew how to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at how simple the lives that the hobbits had, they were probably the best keepers of the ring in the end. And they were the most powerful to help mankind after that.
Mm.
So is the lesson to vote for the Hobbit?
I vote for the Hobbit.
A short person who likes to eat.
Yeah, but you bring up such a great point, Dean. It's this idea of that simplicity. I mean, he had that ring stored, and
sure,
he didn't. I mean, it still affected him, but because of his simplicity and his desire for community, it didn't turn him into the monster. But then even the saving of the day and the Lord of the Rings, it was a simple person that was involved in that.
And the Gray, he knew that. He knew if he touched it, he didn't even want any part of it, but he knew what he had to do with it, and he had to guide the hobbits to the ultimate, sequel.
Wisdom, I guess you could say the Gray. Yeah. Gandalf, wisdom.
Yeah. I like him as the Gray.
Yeah. All right, Rebecca.
Yeah, so I like several of these, but the one I'm going to talk about is number 9. Exercise your liberty to vote your conscience and conviction while accepting the other Christians will do the same and vote differently than you. So I think that in talking about this discussion with power, I think, we talk about it as the politicians are basically fighting over the ring of power and we are electing them. But I think we have a power struggle within ourselves So we end up thinking that we have it figured out. And so with politics, if the definition is organizing for the common good, I think we all want the common good. And so where's the problem? The problem is when we believe that our party or our candidate has the complete monopoly over how to do the common good the best and defining the common good, because what's good for some is not good for others. So I think we have the power over, I think, what I believe is right, and maybe Nick thinks what he believes is right. Probably not, but but then there is that struggle of, you know, who's right and who believes they're right. And I think that this draws us to, there are going to be people in our lives that we deal with every day, whether it's in our church or in our workplace, that are going to vote differently than us. And that does not mean that they are any less human. That does not mean that they are any less of a Christian. And we can really get into our own power, our own ego, I know best, pretty easily, I think, and decide that we have the monopoly over this situation. We can become self-righteous. And I don't want to do that, right? How do we not do that? And so a lot of these like kind of tie right into that. Number 6, if your political passion makes it hard for you to love your neighbor as yourself, you need to turn it down a notch. And I mean, honestly, when I see signs in yards, it kind of fills me with a little bit more anxiety, one way or the other, because I look at my street and I see different types of signs and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's people that we can just walk to their house in a minute and they believe differently. And what is that friction and what does that look like? But I think living in harmony, I don't know how exactly we do that. Maybe you do. But I think that's what we have to strive for. I love where it says you need to turn it down a notch. Because I think we could really change our lives for the worse if we put this election over relationships. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, I know a lot of people are facing that choice. Every holiday, people go home and they say, okay, I'm going to see my parents, I'm going to see my grandparents, and they think differently than me on this. And if we talk about it, there's going to be a huge argument, and it's going to drive a wedge in between me and my family, and maybe we'll never celebrate Thanksgiving, and maybe I don't want to celebrate Thanksgiving this year. I was just with my dad and family a couple weekends ago, just for no particular reason, and we're just like, political issues started coming up. We're like, we better not talk about this, or we're just going to leave angry. And that's not you. I don't see my family that much. I don't want to leave angry all the time.
But maybe the answer is boundaries then. You kind of put up that boundary of, we're probably not going to talk about this today.
And the other thing I think with this, when you have two sides, I think there's something to learn from people who have a different perspective. I want to understand why. What is it that drives people, and what story are they believing? How can I grow as a person through your story? And so I really think that there's an opportunity for us, no matter how confident we are in our political choice or our vote, to really step back and say, we don't have it all figured out. And maybe I need to do a better job at listening to people who have different opinions than me, and maybe they can teach me some things.
And I think that boils down to respect. Like, I'm going to respect you enough to hear what you have to say, to hear your story and how you got there. And there's this book, I think Oprah is in it, and somebody else, it's called What Happened to You, something like that. Like, if I learn more about your life and your experiences and your trauma and where you got to that point, if I take the time to do that, I'm really going to respect you. So I think that respect is...
But so we're getting into some of the applicable things that we can do. So respecting people, listening to their story, knowing that the sign that we see in their front yard does not tell the whole story about who they are. Knowing that no matter who wins an election this November or next November or the years after that, your neighbors are going to be your neighbors for a while. And if they're not, someone else is going to move in who has different opinions than you. And so for me, having these things to do, respect my neighbor, listen to their story, know that there's more to them than one political view, helps lessen my anxiety, helps drive down my anxiety a little bit, because it's taking this kind of nebulous idea, this election, or even just the things in my life that I can't tackle right in this moment, but it gives me concrete things I can think about, concrete things I can do. Rather than being overwhelmed by the anxiety, I can do some steps to get me feeling better. Maybe it doesn't make me feel all the way better. Maybe it doesn't address all of my anxiety, but gets me headed in the right direction rather than spiraling downward.
Yeah, so what can I control versus what can't I control?
Yeah, well, I was going to say that there's a certain element of disconnecting from the political conversation, partisan conversation, unplugging, turn off the phone, going for a walk. There is this world, this beautiful world that I believe God has given us. And when you unplug from the mess and the chaos and the manipulation to get your attention, there's this world out there that it's a world of peace. There's birds flying around. I mean, there's just so much beauty, and actually lowers your heart rate, lowers your stress level. And so I think unplugging is an important element in getting outside.
Yeah, and maybe fill it in too. If you're going to unplug from social media and that connection with people, go to dinner with somebody, and talk to them about something other than politics. Get to hear those stories and understand and respect that person rather than, I mean, maybe they even agree with you politically, but they're going to disagree with you on something.
Sure.
So like fill in with relationships where before there was distance.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when we ask somebody how they're doing, they just say good or fine because they don't really know how they're doing. So I think something that we can do is to just check in with ourselves, whether it's once a day or twice a day or whatever, and actually discern what we're feeling and why we're feeling it. Take a deep breath, things like that.
And realize you're not alone.
Yeah.
There's people around you. And even though if we feel like we're the only one that thinks the way that we do, more likely, if we learn the people around us, there's others who are feeling that same.
Yeah, and just to wrap this up, as if politics is one of the things that's driving your anxiety, go vote. Make a plan to vote, get it done, be part of the process. If you want to make a donation to somebody, make a donation to somebody. Be involved to the degree that your time and your sanity will allow you, and be part of that. I'm involved in church stuff more than politics stuff, but I have a plan to go vote. My wife has already voted, so get it done. Be part of the
Last
conversation.
words, Dean?
Yeah, you know what I think I'd like to do is, as we wrap it up, great conversation today, guys. I think I'm gonna get out in the community and kind of touch on the love thy neighbor portion of it, get their thoughts, what their anxiety is, to bring back to the next show. I think that's gonna be my goal for that. And, just kind of see what's out there. So, and if anybody is listening today who wants to send in a selfie, flip your camera around and say, hey, this is what my anxiety is. We'd love to hear it, and we'd love to hear what you're doing with it, and maybe we can offer some advice or offer what we're doing. So I think we're not done with this conversation. I think it bleeds into the next one. And so I'll turn it back over to you, Nick, and we can do it.
So we invite you to join the conversation. Go to theconversation.org. Let us know where you are on a scale of 1 to 10 about your anxiety. Let us know what you're doing about it, what you'd like to hear about it. And until then, we'll invite you to be part of the conversation next time. See you then.
Grace and peace.